Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's going to be talking about how more automakers are pushing to go direct to consumer with selling vehicles. Before we get in this video though, as always, if you're going to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And then if you're going to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. Let's get into it. So first off, before we dive into the video, I need to quickly describe what direct-to-consumer is. So direct-to-consumer is when a manufacturer sells a product directly to the consumer. And this is not what we experience for the most part with vehicles, because what happens here in the US is a manufacturer sells a vehicle to a dealership, which is a third party, which then sells it to you. So you are actually not the customer for manufacturers. The customers for manufacturers are actually the dealerships, because the dealerships are paying for the vehicles upfront before they sell it to you, right? The dealerships are basically reselling these new vehicles to you. And so that's just how things function in the US. Now, there are some brands that currently do direct to consumer. They're all pretty much EV brands. You've got like Tesla, for example, Rivian, Lucid, right? All the EV startups, those are direct to consumer. But all of the traditional brands, so think like Toyota, General Motors, Stellantis, Ford, right? All these big brands that we normally associate with the American car market, those are all not direct to consumer, right? They all sell through dealership networks. And this is where things get absolutely fascinating, because we are actually slowly moving away from this business model. And it's not in the way that some of you might think, because the direct-to-consumer route that things are going towards is not necessarily technically direct-to-consumer, but it's so close to direct-to-consumer that you might as well call it that. So first off, more and more manufacturers are doing online releases with their vehicles. And so what this looks like is you don't go into a dealership anymore and order a vehicle, right? The manufacturer announces it, and then you go on their website, and then you put in a reservation for that vehicle. And then that reservation obviously lands with a dealership that is within your region. And so it's more direct to consumer. Again, you're still going through a dealership, but it's more direct with the manufacturer. And so that's something that, probably a lot of you are familiar with, because like Ford did it with the Bronco, for example. But more and more manufacturers are starting to adopt this with these new releases. But wait, there's even more. So obviously we have this huge push for electrification here in the US. And with this push for electrification, this is obviously putting dealers in a position where they have to spend a lot of money to build out the infrastructure to support this electrification of the product they're going to be selling in the future. And so some manufacturers like General Motors are offering dealers franchise buyouts. So like with Buick, for example, GM offered a lot of Buick dealers to either build out infrastructure to support electrification or just no longer sell Buicks. And a lot of dealers actually chose to no longer sell the Buick product, interestingly enough. And so this is something that is, starting to ripple through the automotive industry. More manufacturers are obviously going to be pushing for more electrification, and that's going to be pushing for more of this infrastructure. And so there's going to be more franchise buyouts, because dealers are going to basically be, put in a situation where they're like, okay, do we want to take out this buyout that's going to cover this amount of revenue for this amount of time, no longer be able to sell the product and, just try to focus on something else? Or do we want to spend all this money to build out this infrastructure here at our lot to be able to support these sales, right? It's actually a pretty difficult decision for dealers to make. But obviously, and again, Buick's example, there were a lot of Buick dealers that were like, yep, let's go the route of not dealing with the infrastructure and just no longer selling the brand, taking the money and moving on. And so that obviously gives, General Motors more power over the Buick brand, allowing them to be more direct to consumer right? If that makes sense. But if that wasn't enough, the sales process at dealers is transitioning into a process that is more direct to consumer I guess that's the word I'm going to be using for today's video. So since the pandemic is over, right, and since pandemic pricing is over, dealer profits on a per car basis have decreased by a massive amount, which means that a lot of dealers are going back to the whole wave of paying their staff based off of volume rather than off of gross profit. And so what this means is that more and more dealers are focusing on just selling as many cars as they can rather than focusing on making as much money per car deal, which again is not technically direct to consumer, but it's more in that direction, because this is what direct to consumer manufacturers like Tesla focus on, right? That's That's Tesla's big focus right now, is just sell as many cars as they possibly can rather than trying to make the most amount of profit on each car. And on top of that, it's just having, set pricing in all these cars. And when you look at these dealers that have these volume pay plans for their staff, then what you see is a lot of the times the pricing is just set, like that's just what the pricing is. And so then it gives the customers more of the direct to consumer like experience when they purchase a car, because they're not going in and negotiating back and forth. It's like, this is the price, and then you just move along the sales process. And then the next big part of this is the consolidation of dealerships here in the US. The big dealer groups here in the US are only getting bigger, right? They're buying out all of these small dealerships here in the US. And with this consolidation, this actually puts the car business in a place where it's more direct to consumer like, because a lot of these big dealer groups just have set rules and set pricing and set everything across their entire group. And because a lot of these big dealer groups are actually publicly traded now, that means that the manufacturers are able to buy into these publicly traded dealer groups, and they're able to kind of exercise more power over the dealer groups, right? Because let's say that you're a dealer group that maybe has like a couple franchises with a particular manufacturer, right? There's going to be a relationship there, but it's not going to be like, too much back and forth, right? Because you're a small player. But let's say that you're a big dealer group and you have 150 dealerships that have a particular brand, right? You better believe there's gonna be a lot of communication between that dealer group and that manufacturer, because, well, that dealer group is obviously a big part of that manufacturer here in the US market. And so with that, right, there's obviously a lot of communication in terms of, streamlining the sales process to where the manufacturer feels like it's, what they want, right? And so again, as this consolidation continues in the US market, then it's basically just kind of making it so everything's the same throughout dealerships in the US. And so again, that's more on the direct consumer side of things. So to summarize, if you look up the technical dictionary definition of direct to consumer, what we're moving towards is not technically direct to consumer, but it's going to mirror it so well that the average Joe isn't going to notice, or actually be able to perceive the difference between this faux direct to consumer and actual direct to consumer. Again, there's more online ordering. You have the situation where more and more of these dealers are paying off of volume. So you've got set pricing across the board, and you have the streamlined sales experience. I mean, we're moving into a market where I bet in the next, 10, maybe 15 years, we're not really going to have like the traditional dealership staff that we have right now. What we're going to have is basically these, quote unquote, salespeople that are basically just there to take your order. And then once you've put in your order, right, it just is as simple as waiting for the car to show up, and then that same person is going to deliver that car to you. And that's pretty much it. And again, on the surface, it looks like that's what a lot of these big dealer groups are kind of going towards, because again, there's got to be a lot of communication with them and the manufacturers, and moving towards a business model that is more direct to consumer like. So with all of that being said, I don't foresee there being a world where dealerships don't exist anymore, because again, what you have to remember is that manufacturers do not have enough money to be able to buy out all the dealerships here in the US. And frankly, it doesn't make sense for them to buy out all of the dealerships, because with the dealerships owning the land and owning all the infrastructure, that takes off a lot of risk for the manufacturers. And that risk is also in the form of money that the manufacturers can spend on other stuff. And so, I mean, if you look at like just any manufacturer, the buyout number would be absolutely enormous. I mean, just take any random manufacturer, and it's going to be in the hundreds of billions to buy out all the dealerships and buy out all the inventory. So it just doesn't make any sort of sense. But with them working together and with a lot of these processes being changed, it's pushing towards a market where it's going to be more direct to consumer like. And so I want you guys to let me know what you think about these changes. Do you think these are enough? Like, again, just be completely like practical minded with this. If you went into a dealership and it was basically just you walk in and you go, I want this car with these features, and then they just punch in your order, the pricing is set, there's no negotiation, it's just like Tesla, is that something that you'd actually like? Or do you like the dealership experience we have now, where there is some level of negotiation and you can, shop with different dealers, right? Because again, in this, scenario that is being pushed for, there wouldn't be any shopping between different dealers, because all the dealers would have the exact same price on the cars. Let me know what you think about that. I'll see ya.